some more experienced guys, they were organizing this sort of kind of computer crime courses at Helsinki Police Department. Soon after completing those, I was invited to the National Bureau of Investigation's computer crime investigation kind of trainings, and then that led me into the Interpol training. So it was kind of a fun period because everything was really born back then.
This is a Security Weekly production. Security Weekly is a resource of Cyber Risk Alliance.
The Cybersecurity Collaborative, in conjunction with Cyber Reason, is proud to present CISO Stories. Each week, CISO Stories takes a deep dive on security leadership. The Cybersecurity Collaborative is a unique membership community enabling cybersecurity leaders to work together in a trusted environment. To learn more, visit securityweekly.com/CSC.
Today, I'm joined by my good friend and colleague, Petri Kuivala. Petri, how are you today?
I'm excellent. Thanks for asking, Sam.
Yeah, and Petri is the CISO for NXP, among many other things. And Petri and I were introduced to each other by another friend named Tatu Ulonen, who's also been a guest on the show. And we served on a board together for SSH Communications for a little over 2 years, Petri? Is that right? We were both there?
I believe it was about 2 years. It felt even longer, but maybe that's only because of the fact that there was a kind of a big burden for making sure that it kind of gets better. And I believe that we did our share pretty well.
Yeah, I sometimes talk to people about the biggest problem in security being generally about security being aligned with the business. And here was an opportunity where we had a third person on the board as well. And besides Tatu, Anne-Marie Zettelmeyer, who's also a security person, but we actually had a majority of the board for a while were security people, which is unusual for any company. It was a good experience, I think. And I certainly appreciated working with you. You're living where today? I know you're part-time in, I think, the Netherlands, is that right? And partly in Finland. Where's home these days?
Home is wherever you feel to be at home, in my opinion. But in more practical terms, you are correct. The headquarters of the NXP Semiconductors is at Eindhoven, Netherlands, where I'm usually, at least prior to the COVID-19, I used to be there every second week or so. But now I have been about 3 months here in Helsinki house with my family, working remotely, which is also something that I have been doing prior to the COVID quite a lot. So during the last 6 years, it has been pretty much on and off living between these two countries and, of course, in the airplane and everywhere else.
That must be a whole different experience because I know you spend an enormous amount of time, as do I, under normal conditions flying around. But you've lived in other places as well. I think even China's on the list, isn't it?
I lived in China back a while ago. That was between, 2004 and 2006 or so. Beijing was still developing and going to be the host of the Olympics for 2008. And I really liked the kind of atmosphere where everything is kind of constantly developing and you can see it on a day-to-day basis, which is not always the case here in the West.
I remember visiting in a similar time frame. I went to Guangzhou back then, and it had this muscly growth feeling, this runaway explosion of activity, which was an amazing experience in many ways.
It really is amazing, to be honest. And just not taking the example from the industry or so, but just saying so that walking on the streets where you can see people around the age of 70 or whatever, them jumping into the branch of the tree, starting to do pull-ups. You never see that in New York or wherever you're living. Or people building the metro network. In a month, you were able to kind of complete one large section that would, for example, here in Helsinki, take about 10 years. And those are just kind of what the heck moments.
That's amazing. I'm used to seeing the subway station coming, and it's years later, not a month.
Yeah. No, exactly.
Were you there for security at the time, or was it a different role?
Yeah, I've been in security for a long time already, and back then in China, it was a partially different role, partially similar sort of role. That post and stint was more kind of between the cybersecurity, as it was called back then, IT security, and then the physical world security, and combining all of those. major piece of that was actually back then from the IT perspective, the factories, and it was the time of the code red and so on. So whoever remembers the WannaCry these days, I got my first battle trainings on for 2004 or 5, whenever it was.
Yeah, Code Red, Code Red 1, Code Red 2, NIMDA, they were all, back in those days, we used to call them, the term became blended threat, which is what Symantec called them. I used to call them hybrid threats in days, but blended threat I always thought was like a Starbucks drink. And of course it was attributed to the Chinese at the time, or at least it even said, hacked by Chinese, if memory serves. So you said way back now. I learned after we knew each other for about a year, and I should have perhaps known this sooner, but I learned that you were a police officer originally, and that you did that for nearly a decade. And
that is very true.
Yeah?
That is very, very true. So I didn't plan to become a police officer. I thought that I'm going to be a teacher or I'm going to be an engineer. I was able to actually get inside into the engineering school and to become a biotechnical engineer somewhere at the end of the 90s, whenever it was, it was at the end of the 80s, Yeah, memory fails me. And anyway, I got into the police school regardless of that on year 90, 91, I guess it was, or 92, somewhere there. And then served in police department of Helsinki for about 8.5 years. Been doing pretty much anything and everything that a young guy could be dreaming of. Being really on a field, have been kind of chasing the bank robbery on a feed, and it was an armed bank robber that had not happened in Helsinki for the last 20 years. So and many other things, of course, been doing the investigations and ended up into the computer crime units. But pretty much anything that the young guy could be doing in the police, I was doing that because I was just curious.
So you were beat cop, right? And you were doing all the things that you see, I guess, in a TV show and some of the drama now, it sounds like, with a bank robbery. Did you get security bug before you were at the police force and just wound up there? Or were you exposed to the computer crime team and then gravitated to it, or both?
No, that's a very, very good question. So prior to being a police, I didn't ever dream of being a police or anywhere in the security industry. So I think that I was doing my compulsory army service together with one friend of mine that I have known since I was really a kid. And he somehow found out the idea of getting to the test for the police forces and asked me one day in advance that, hey, how about you? Would you like to join me? And with the really long thinking, at least 15 minutes, I said, yeah, why not? Hey, let's get out there.
This is how lives are formed and changed. Yeah, they happen very quickly.
They are, and especially when you're like 18, 19 or whatever, you may have had some dreams that are based on with your kind of conversations with your parents or whatever, but they can change over the course of one lunch or whatever it is. And that was kind of my life-changing experience of my friend asking me to join over there in the test, and I passed it through, and then of course the decision was more like based on the fact that it takes about a year to become a police officer, and it takes multiple years to become an engineer. My thinking was that it was kind of the economic downturn back then, that it would be kind of good to have this sort of profession where you at least have some sort of decent salary and some sort of payout quite quickly. And that's how I ended up into the security landscape.
When were you first exposed to computers? We're about a similar age, I believe. So probably the same aspects of machines and programming languages.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I was born in 70, and I think that I was able to, whenever was the Sinclair 42 introduced, I didn't got that one, but I guess that was my first computer that I played some games with. It must have been at the end of the 70s or in the beginning of the 80s, whenever it was. And quite soon after, some of my good friends were getting VIC 20s or whatever they were. And then on one Christmas, I got my Commodore 64.
Nice.
Yeah. Of course, we first used mostly for gaming. But quite soon after, me and a few of our friends, we kind of subscribed for a magazine about the computers, and in that magazine you had a kind of quest every month of completing certain type of programming kind of events or programming exercises or so. And we did that pretty much every month, and that teaches me basically the basics of the programming. I couldn't say that I'm a programmer in any means, but yeah, those were the kind of great days. We coded some small games and so on for our fun. Never really kind of sold them out, but that's how it started at the beginning of 80s, I would say, yes.
We are about the same age. I think it's 2 years between us.
Yeah.
But I remember seeing the VIC-20s and the Commodore 64s. For me, it was the TI-99 4A. I remember getting those monthly magazines. There was always a problem you had to solve, and there was always sample code. Yeah. And it was fun to try to write the sample code up first and then get it better. And the backup medium were things like tapes. It was a riot.
Yeah, tape it was, yeah.
Yeah, and the sound of an acoustic coupler is something that will stay with me forever. So you went to the police academy on a whim, and then you're in the police force. And if you can talk about it, how did you connect with the computer crimes group? How did that happen? And of the 9-10 years you were there, how long did you spend on computers in particular?
Yeah, with the computer crime unit, I was there maybe about 2.5, 3 years or so, but I connected with the computers in a force already, right, almost from the very, very beginning of it. So I had the kind of national, normal curiosity for computers, obviously, and I think it was very first days or so when I started to see that the guys are using the first PCs. They were the 286s or 386s or so, and started to, of course, have conversations with the guy who was supporting those systems within the district, in a police district in Helsinki or so. And I think that it took only a year or two or so until I was nominated to be the official support personnel for the whole police district, among about 10 to 15 other guys. And of course, that was a great learning platform for just understanding what the heck the more modern computing was. And then that, of course, led quickly to another thing. We did some kind of elementary crime analysis with the SQL, combining basically the crime data against the maps and so on, trying to understand that if there is any patterns happening within the eastern part of the Helsinki police, for example, stealing cars, whatever, narcotics, whatever it was, and just kind of experimenting with it. Then, of course, that led to the question that at some stage there were some more experienced guys. They were organizing this sort of kind of computer crime courses at Helsinki Police Department. Soon after completing those, I was invited to the National Bureau of Investigation's computer crime investigation kind of trainings, and then that led me into the Interpol training. So it was kind of a fun period because everything was really born back then, and everyone was starting really from the scratch at the time being.
And so then I think, was it Nokia right after the police department that you went and then on to China? Is that the order or am I accelerating things? Yeah.
No, that's the order. Yeah.
And what made you decide to leave the police force and go into the private sector?
In many sense, it was a kind of a difficult decision, and in many sense, it was not difficult at all. So I'm obviously a kind of person who is exploring new things. And the best friend of mine, who I actually met even yesterday, that I have known since I was 4 years old, he had been working with Nokia already like 10 years or whatever it was. And he called me out of blue sky that they are establishing a kind of e-commerce group that will be competing with Yahoo and Hotmail of the time being from Microsoft. And they think that they would need to have something like the IT security or cyber security over there, but they don't have anyone really good in the company. So would I be willing to join? And I was actually the third IT security person within whole Nokia company or so, without having kind of expected from me. So sorry for my friends.
No, that's okay. That's okay. No, keep it real.
Yeah. And how did I kind of succeed over there was, on my opinion, with the police skills of just asking questions. I have millions of great engineers next to me, and I was just walking to them asking that, hey, there is this traffic going on from this place to another one. how do we make sure that it stays safe? And then they help me to understand what is the difference between the VPN and SSL. They help me to understand what are the kind of authentication mechanisms. They help me to understand whatsoever topics that I came with to them. And my job was more like a kind of a crime scene investigator, collecting that all together and defining kind of target architecture with all of those learnings. And I guess it was like 1 year and 6 months after or whatever it was, and that we actually had a target architecture for the e-commerce sites with Nokia, which actually was used for at least 15, 20 years after that. Of course, modified all the time, but all the basics were there.
I remember in 2007, 2014, I was with RSA, and it was my first visit to Helsinki, and Nokia was one of our biggest consumers of crypto. It was amazing infrastructure was put in place around crypto. I had no idea, of course, that we probably passed each other without seeing each other in those days.
We did for sure, but to be fully honest, of course, there was a kind of specialist crew for the product security as such. So they would must have been around the crypto. I know all of them, but all the credit goes to them. I was not designing our cryptos, no.
And so there you were, Mr. Security, third in the department, and they were so happy with you, they sent you to China. They're like, let's get this guy out of Helsinki and send him over there. You went to China for, you said 2 years about, then you came back to Finland, or did you go somewhere else?
Yeah, so let's start. Why did that end up into China? That's already so long ago that maybe it's okay to actually open that kind of worms a bit. Mm-hmm. So obviously we had some break-ins into our systems within the company in 2004, 2003 or
this
somewhere
is outsiders hacking in, yeah.
You know, actually, that case specifically, we had outsider cases as well, but that case actually was an insider. We were able to see that some of our core R&D systems were really kind of studied and investigated, and someone was collecting the data, but whoever he was able to have his tracks covered so well that it was very, very difficult to actually trace him back, that who is he and what is he doing. And we established kind of investigation team around of the guy, and it took about 9 months for us to be able to actually identify who he was. And the funny small detail there, everyone is always kind of wondering that how do you really then nail the guy down? And he had been doing this stuff for ages, and of course coming maybe a bit sloppy while doing his hacking activities and collecting the data. He was fulfilling his kind of annual goal documentation at the same time, and I don't think that there is anyone who is ever kind of filling in annual goal and target settings for anyone else. So that was a pretty kind of good identifier. That bloody hell, now we need to know that who is this guy.
That's funny. So essentially, his life was creeping in and giving some telltales of some sort. You were able to figure a bit out. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, but that case kind of led me into China. I went there, I interviewed the guy, and I got to be friends with the head of corporate security of Nokia in China back then there. And after the 2 weeks stint of doing the interviews and understanding the country a bit better, he asked me that would I like to join. And of course, as I said already earlier, I'm a bit adventurous, so that's what I did. I decided to go into China, and we had a wonderful time over there. My second kid was born over there.
And you have 2 children, 3 children?
I do, two I have. Yes, now the younger one is 15 and seems to be there in the backyard taking sun bath.
Oh, that's fantastic. Are either of your children following in the same footsteps? Are they interested in security, or is that just the boring stuff my ex-policeman dad used to do? Is it interesting to them?
I would say it's a bit too early to say. My son, who is now turning 18 this summer, is currently showing some signs that he actually might be interested about the cyber. I wouldn't yet say that wherever his life is taking him to, no idea. But my daughter, extremely multi-talented person, doesn't dislike obviously what I'm doing here, but doesn't show really interest as such. Really artistically talented, and we'll see. Well, now she's talking about being an architect, but more like in real world.
That's fantastic. So just to put a point on the police to private sector transition. Do you believe that being a policeman affected how you do security still today? Has it informed you or influenced you, or do you think you would have wound up the same Petri Kuivala that you are today?
I would not have wound up of being who am I without this path, of course, as no one in the life, of course, all our experiences in the past are, of course, guiding us through. What I'm carrying mostly with me, especially from those times, is that I want the decisions to be objective and objectively correct. Many times the people in the power wants to actually make very quick decisions, especially when it comes to the negative side of the cybersecurity and our security itself, and doesn't actually want to collect all the details to make sure that the decision is always also 100% certain. And in my opinion, one of the most meaningful areas for CISOs and their teams is that they need to be the one who is willing to stand kind of in front of the line when the management wants to fire someone.
Oh, right.
And you don't yet know actually that is this really the person. I've been many times actually during my career in a position where someone has already made a hasty decision that, hey, this is the guy who kind of is the culprit. And then we have studied a bit more, and then actually that was not the case.
Yeah, there's no substitute for data. And there's no substitute for the thoroughness of work, and no matter how obvious things seem. But it's true not just with people, it's true with solving problems in a business or other context as well.
It is, yeah.
So I take from that process, I take from that a quest for the truth, that while it might be urgent, you have to do it right. Is that a fair summary? Or
I think that's a fair summary, yes. And maybe another kind of small detail that I'm carrying with me, whatever I'm doing, I'm always asking why, when, where, how, and what. Those are kind of my guidances. If I don't know, how should I continue? Those are the 5 questions always that I ask from myself. And usually they lead me to do another question, and eventually I'll get there, wherever I'm going to.
Yeah, it's the old writer's guidance, which is a lot of things are narrative based, they're story based. Maybe we infer a story on the human experience, but I think doing so very often leads you to snippets of truth, right? Like what's a motivation?
They do. Yeah.
Maybe I'm thinking of life as a crime novel too much, and the policeman discussion got me in the mood.
I don't know if it's a crime model, but if you are reading the Hararis of this world, for example, you can easily see that storytelling it is. Then policing is, of course, all about life. So I guess there is a kind of cross path.
So I loved that book, not because it didn't touch on anything particularly new for me. Most of it I think I picked up, but the sequence it was put in, the narrative, the elegant storytelling that tied everything from math to history together in a sequence. I think that took a paragraph. It was remarkable.
It was remarkable, and I felt it exactly the same way as you did. And it was just wonderful to be able to see the series and how it was kind of put together as such as one narrative. It was just great.
Yeah, so for those listening, the book is Sapiens by Noah Yuval Harari. I hope I got the name right and didn't transpose any names. But have you read the sequel, Homo Deus, I think it's called? Have you tucked into that one? Because I haven't gotten to it at this point.
You mean the other 2 books of the Harari?
Yeah, the rest of the Harari series. Yeah, I think the second one's Homo Deus.
I cannot remember the names of the books as well as you just did with one. Actually, the last one made people like 21st century something, whatever it was.
Yes, 21 somethings for 21st century. Yeah, somebody out there
that's something like that.
Listening to this going, you're not getting it, but yeah.
Yeah, the first book was absolutely the best one, but I must say that I had to read all of them when I started with the first book, and they were excellent. Yeah,
and
absolutely recommendation. Yeah,
is reading a big thing in your life because you're on planes so much, or is it a big thing? Is it fit into your routine that you have to read so many hours a day type thing?
It's a big part of my life, but not in a plane. In a plane, I'm doing my emails, but then I'm exactly. But I'm doing always reading before I'm getting to bed. I don't like watching any more TV that much. After the evening news, I'm usually getting to the bed and reading an hour or so just to kind of get more relaxed, and then the sleep comes easily.
So what are you reading now? What are the 2 books beside the bedstand?
Oh, damn. Yeah. You got me.
Yeah. I'm going to bet that there's a police novel there. So.
Yeah, I've actually, now I do. Yeah. There's one book that I'm reading at the moment, and that goes to back to the police days quite well. There used to be kind of homicide investigator who was like 10, 15 years older than I was, and he was a legend here in Helsinki. And he obviously retired about half a year ago, and he made a book. And I'm in the middle of that book at the moment, and it's just kind of interesting to see that what did he see and experience during his life over there in the same occupation as such. And the book next to that, a while ago, I read a book about the Phoenix project, which is more about the agile transformation. And then there is the Unicorn project, is the name of the second book. Yes, so I'm in the middle of the Unicorn project at the same time. So trying to obviously transit our NXP cybersecurity culture and the whole IT culture to be much more agile and making sure that we are capable of delivering faster than we ever have been doing before.
And do you have any other hobbies? I know you used to be a triathlete when you were younger. Do you have other things that help keep the body and the mind sharp, or just allow you to relax?
Yeah, I would say probably that I sport whatever sports there is, and at the moment the funniest thing to do is on my kite surfing, and I'm learning to be a kind of foil surfer, but currently it is not foil surfing; it's swimming with the foil. But anyway, it is bloody tough.
That's funny. We're approaching the end of our time. I have two questions for you. The first is, what would you advise the young police officer thinking about cyber, or the person who's thinking of getting in today's world? Because it's not the same as when you and I did it. Him or her, whatever walk of life you imagine, what advice do you have for someone who's getting into cyber, or is saying, I'm in it and I don't know if it's for me? They're sort of, maybe they're just getting to understand it. What advice do you have for the young person in security?
Don't lock your mind is the first one. Don't ever think that you know what it is. Be bloody open-minded. Ask the questions all the time. I'm just asking the questions and keeping your mind open. I guess those are the two main things really to do. For sure, there's kind of multiple other things to do. Is it different than it used to be? For sure, technically, the surface has changed a lot. But what I'm saying to the board of directors or the leadership teams of the companies who are asking my opinion about the cybersecurity and claiming that it's bloody complicated also, I'm always telling to them that, yeah, cyber may feel complicated in the beginning when you're looking into the surface of it. But when you look into the underlying kind of principles and underlying laws of gravity, so to say, in a cyber, they haven't changed, in my opinion, during the last 30 years a bit. And as long as we start to understand that what is really the skeleton behind the body, you are capable actually of understanding the phenomena of today that are varying day by day through actually the skeleton, through the fundamentals. And that makes it actually quite understandable. And I must just, not naming the last name, but all the credits to Jussi who made me to think about this.
Excellent. I'm sure Jussi will hear this and smile. So my last question has two parts. The first is, do you play poker? And if so, would you join a group of us either remotely, given we're all over the world and not flying very much right now, or in person when all this hopefully changes one day for a game of security poker? Do you play, and would you join us?
I'm not actively playing, but when I was younger, and I mean much younger, maybe 10 years older, between 10 and 20 years, we played quite a lot with my friends. And then, of course, during the police days, we also had the habit of having biannual sauna events, where, of course, in Finland, you also have something to drink during the sauna. And you have to, of course, have something to do during these breaks of the sauna, so we always played poker. So yeah, absolutely, I want to participate whenever and wherever you are able to organize it for.
Excellent. So, by sauna, do you mean like a hot room where you would drink and play cards? Is that?
So.
Because I hadn't thought of that dimension, to increase the pressure.
We were not playing in the sauna itself. And that was during the breaks there or after the sauna also. And if you are talking about the really proper Finnish sauna, then you have a kind of stove over there with the stones, and you are throwing the water into the stones, so it's bloody humid as well inside. Hot, it can be like close to 100 Celsius degrees or so. So yeah, usually you need to have something to drink right after. And then as I said, while you're drinking, maybe you want to play a card as well.
My tell is I go red and sweat, so maybe I should do this. Maybe we should go in the sauna.
That's a good one.
All right. Well, Petri, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate you doing this, and I can't wait to see you again sometime, and I hope we get a chance to work together again someday as well.
I truly hope so. Have a good one, Sam, and we for sure will meet. I don't know when and where, but we always do.
We do. Thank you, Petri.
Cybereason is the champion for today's defenders, providing an endpoint security platform to prevent, detect, and respond to malicious operations on computers, mobile devices, servers, and the cloud. Cybereason. End cyber attacks from endpoints to the enterprise to everywhere.